Welcome to the Natural Genius podcast. We're here to help you tap into your natural genius. Let's go. The amazing Em Roblin is an uplifting soul to be around. I can feel the laughter inside bubbling up in anticipation of catching up with her. When we met at network school, she had this great photo on her social media profiles, and it sort of looked a bit superwoman or superhero style and quite pop art. And that's who she's just a stylish, excited person who loves to see people thrive and is very much enjoying her studies. And I'm so looking forward to hearing what she's been up to and what she's been creating in the personal growth and leadership space, and about living in Bali as well and traveling the world with her beautiful family. Enjoy listening to Em Roblin. Welcome to the Natural Genius podcast, the amazing Em Roblin. Welcome. Come on down. I didn't need to throw some
When you get
in there.
excited, your high tone disappears. I don't know if it's just me, but it's kind of fun because I can see you're excited, but it's
the second time now. We did it before we hit record, didn't we? And I just got too excited that I blew the speakers out of Google Meet that we're recording this through. It is a delight to get together again. And I know that your work is all about thriving and you are just so good at it. And I can't wait to get in and talk about a few of the memories that we have of being at network school together. Tell me, at the moment, what is it that has you thriving? What are some of your favourite moments that might have come to mind with the studies that you're doing? Favourite memories?
a really big question. I mean, so I've spent the last number of years, right, deep into the literature of what is thriving. And I'm contrasting that with what is flourishing. So, I've been a practitioner for like more than 2 decades, and something about being mid-career was like, I really want to understand what thriving like deeply means in the literature, right? Like what that looks like. So before I even share what thriving means to me in my life right now, why don't I just define it? I mean, based on what this sort of scholarly literature says. And again, I tend to come at this from organizational literature because I tend to work with folks of course, it's very difficult to separate thriving at work and thriving in life. And that's another interesting piece. But I tend to follow a lot of the organizational research. So, many people define thriving like vitality and learning. This is different than you might think, right? So like thriving is like vitality. So that's like having energy, feeling engaged, feeling part of something, feeling that like jump in your step, that excitement to get out of bed in the morning. This is kind of, that's the vitality piece, right? And then the learning. Learning as a key part of thriving. I remember years ago when I first saw that definition, that something really clicked for me because so many people that I work with, they're very high achieving leaders from like an external stand. Like they're thriving from the outside. The perception is that they're thriving individuals, but something happens to a lot of folks where they're working towards something. They get there, and what happens? They stagnate. They stop learning. It's like once you finally achieve, okay, I want to be partner in that law firm, or I want to get to GP in that VC fund, or whatever it is. I'm motivated by the tension of where I am and where I want to be, and that tension's really motivating. But then somebody gets there and they're like, well, it isn't all what I thought it was going to be. And like, so when I went and read the literature, I was like, that's really interesting, that learning, maintaining the right sort of cadence of learning mixed with that vitality is kind of like a key part of thriving, right?
Mm.
And I think that's different than what I've studied around flourishing. Okay, so maybe I'm getting like way into the weeds, right? But like,
Yeah.
I've been fascinated by, okay, well, what does the literature say about what flourishing is? Flourishing is much more ecosystemic. So thriving, you heard me talking about a person, right? Like, are you energetic? Are you learning? It's a very individualistic thing in a lot of the literature. Whereas flourishing is much more like, Sam, if you're not all right, can I be all right? Like, what are the conditions in our whole ecosystem? This idea that we're all healthy or we're all not healthy. And are we creating the conditions for people to thrive, right? So I think like I've been fascinated my whole career and kind of juggling the relationship between those two things. So if I talk about thriving in my own life right now, because that was your question, right? I would say I've been practicing a lot, building this habit around deep work, right? As a emerging scholar and as a practitioner, making sure I have this habit of being able to go into periods of deep work. And so there's the actual deep work that I'm doing around my research, but then there's just actually the like growing the habit of being able to do that. I would say that I'm thriving in that. Like, in other words, it's not always fun, right? but I'm learning, and there's a lot of energy there. And back to our, like, the difference between thriving and flourishing. Well, I might be experiencing that, but I'm bumping into the ecosystem. I'm bumping into my flourishing ecosystem around, like, what are the needs of my clients? What are the needs of my family? What are the needs of all those? Do I have the whole support system that can make sure that everything else is still functioning well when I'm doing that? They're interrelated. So I would say I'm thriving in that. I'm getting some beautiful steps forward there. Yeah, that's a deep answer to your question.
Yeah, I am. You know me, Em. I love that answer. Tell me more, Em. What has you excited about that? There's something more.
Yeah, I'm in an interesting moment, right? So, wrapping up sort of the dissertation phase of my research, and in practice, let's talk about some of the amazing, fun things I've been able to do at the network school, right? So, there's a lot to say there, and maybe we try to start where we are and then move backwards. I think there's an interesting story behind it, but last month, a Polish guy that you might remember from network school, Mateusz, and we sort of partnered up and did the very first iteration of the Flourishing Lab.
Oh,
yeah,
so exciting, Em.
Yeah, so this is a 2-day thing, and literally it felt like me pulling it from the sky. Like Mateusz and I, we work really well together. He's like software engineer turned coach. I'm kind of like, decades long practitioner in the leadership space. But I really do have this kind of inventor, creator type energy. And so the Flourishing Lab has been something it's been like brewing slowly for some time, through a number of different streams of work and communities of practice I'm part of. It's this, I guess the pull behind it was this strong desire, like, I don't want to talk about flourishing. I want to practice it. All of us, like, can we stop talking about it? Can we play flourishing? And people are like, can we play? Can we practice flourishing? And I got to the point in a few communities where I said that out loud, and people were like, I want to do that. I want to play and practice flourishing. But then they're like, but what does that mean exactly? And I'm like, yes.
Let me pull that from the sky.
Something like that. Like, especially
I've totally got FOMO now.
Well, like in the academic communities, right? They're like, so which like, which framework are you using? And I'm like, yes. Can I get back to you on that? Right. So it's just an interesting meeting point of like, okay, I'm studying all this stuff, and then I have all this practitioner experience, and it's just like this playground of, there's a gap there, I think, of like, how do we actually play? So, I mean, at the network school, what we've been doing now for, I guess it's been over a year, right? Is every time a new group comes in, which is the beginning of every month, we lay an important foundation, and we use a psychometric to do that, PrinciplesYou. But really the intention is, what if as you enter into this community, you have the space to lead, to interact with people, to apply yourself, to think in a way that you really prefer. Like, what would that even look like? So that's the, let's say, the beginning of some shared agreements around creating conditions for people to flourish, is to ask some of those questions, like, well, maybe we have automatic ways of doing things in other communities, but what if we could actually design it in such a way that you could lead from a place that brings you more vitality, that brings you more energy? And so we sort of start the month asking some of those big questions and giving people a shared language using the psychometric, right? Because you get these archetypes. It's like, oh, maybe, and even just in the example I shared about the partnership I have with Mateusz, it's like, oh, Em's got this like really big and sort of inventor and creator energy, and Mateusz has this kind of grounded coach, caring energy. And we can observe that about each other in many different examples, but it's fun to see it in these psychometrics, to just get a language and a sort of shared understanding about it. But the Flourishing Lab, so, everybody does that. And we do that at the beginning of the month, and it creates an important grounding and momentum, right?
And but also for you, sorry to interrupt, Em, also for you, I loved seeing the data for you, to be able to see every month more and more data building around that community with respect to one tool being PrinciplesYou, and the giggles or the chuckles that I saw people have when I saw them do it, maybe the third month or so that I was there, and it was like, that island of implementer, it is empty, or it had 2 people on it or something, and the rest of it was like these innovators and these build, like, I guess the kind of real builder energy of the frontier sort of environment that it is.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because it's an interesting piece. When I started this in V1, right? V1 of network school was just like the very beginning, the first 3 months in 2024. And I mapped maybe 30, 40 people at that time. And it seems obvious now, looking back, right, that who were those people? They were the people who answered a call to go to an island, and they didn't even know where in the world it was. Right? So they're like,
and I think like you or anyone else that goes through innovating and researching, I just love it when you get surprised and delighted and like in awe. That's such a lovely feeling for you to receive.
It is. And it was interesting because it seems obvious now, looking back, right, that you would have a lot of people that would fit the kind of frontier archetype at that, in a V1 of something like that. But actually, in many ways, for me personally, it was like the first time ever that I was with so many people like me, because I have that same iterative, experimental, sort of like early adopter energy. And I've emerged I've grown my entire practice pretty much in the corporate space. So can you imagine just my own energy of playing in this space? It's been really fun. But I'll just say this last piece around something important around the Flourishing Lab and why it's been so fun is that I guess the Flourishing Lab, in a way, does almost the opposite of that. If that one's about, let's create a kind of shared language around some self-awareness and consider how we might lead with our preferences, I think the design of the Flourishing Lab is sort of around the question of, like, what is this situation asking of me now? So it's the meeting point of like, I have this self-awareness. I know what my unique strengths are. And and I maybe have had some practice of applying that. But
Mm.
where's the meeting point of that with like a particular this situation? And in the Flourishing Lab, it's literally just 2 days of we just throw people into situations, super complex, super chaotic, uncertain, ambiguous, like all kinds of like different. Some are simulations, some are problems to solve, some are discussions. It's like, but the idea being the meeting point of those, it's not just lead with your strengths.
Mm.
There's something unidimensional and oversimplistic about that. I think it's like, what is this situation asking of me? And where might my preferences be valuable? And it's there's a lot of really interesting things that happen when you're put into a safe place to practice. And that's the whole point. Is like, let's practice in a playful, low risk way
Yeah,
and
wow.
notice what that means for real life, right? So
So
I have
tell us more, because I feel like more context. Like, tell me more about this playful, safe environment that you set up, and what was it like for people, and what did you observe?
yeah, well, before I even say that, I'll just say this one last thing, right? Like people think
Mm.
about thriving, and a lot of the research, not all the, but some of it, right? It's like, it's thriving in a controlled environment.
Mm.
You think about flourishing, even just the word, you think about like, I don't know, rainbows and unicorns and like, I don't know, you think of something idealistic and like, sort of utopic or something, right? But it's like, that's not what thriving and flourishing needs to be. I mean, we're living in a
Mm.
time of change. It's There's complexity, right? It's super chaotic. There's a lot of paradox. So like I'm interested in like what is flourishing in complexity,
Now. Yeah.
and like what is thriving in a lot of uncertainty. It's
Mm.
like what is that, right? And those, I'm not trying to give people a framework or all the answers, like step 1, 2, and 3, but actually experience some of it, and then try and decipher what that means for you, right? So like, you know, back to what was the question you asked me? Like, how did we actually do that in the lab? Is that your question? Or how do we
Yeah,
do it in real life?
yeah. I think that for people who are listening, to be able to imagine what the lab was like and what you learnt from that. I'm especially thinking about other leadership and culture development and personal growth um, experts or people working in that field, being able to learn from what you've created.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, day one had elements for folks that have been doing leadership or have participated in things, like has elements of what we might consider like an experiential component to it, right? Like
Mm.
let's do an activity together, right?
Mm.
Um, we probably on day one did 7 or 8 different, let's call them like activities,
Yeah.
simulations, some
Yeah.
silly, like really silly, like, we're going to throw a ball around a group of people, but the conditions
Mm.
are going to keep changing. And actually, you're kind of in the driver's seat around how far we go. And like,
Mm.
so it's giving the space for a group of people who are creating trust in that,
Mm.
even they might know each other beforehand. In that moment, they're creating a team dynamic. They're sort of forming a team. Uh, they get the agency to decide what success looks like. And so
Mm.
even in this simple game, like where you're passing a ball around, the
Mm.
facilitator kind of puts the agency over to the folks that are participating in the game to say like, well, what makes you decide if you've reached the metric of success? I can give you examples of other teams that have played this and what the kind of
Mm.
results they get, but like trying to get that clarity around success. And then they observe what happens and they have a space to reflect on who they're
Mm.
being, how they're showing
Mm.
up, and
Mm.
also who we're being, right? There's like an
Mm.
individual and a collective element around like, who are we being? What is working? What isn't? What is this situation asking of us that
Mm.
perhaps we haven't risen to consider? And then we just
Mm.
do it again. So it's like you have this chance to kind of, you know, participate in an activity, and then pause and reflect and then go back. So that kind of that cadence sort of mirrors a bit of like an experiential activity where, but actually the reflection is the key part of that, of the experience itself. You just play a game, it's just a game, right? But you reflect on who you're being and what's working and what's not, individually and collectively. That starts to give you a learning, it starts to build that learning culture. Not until later, after we've done a number of those, do we actually ask the question, well, what on earth does this have to do with life, right? And where are we seeing these dynamics in real cases, and how does how's what we've lived here apply? That comes later. And I think I have a mentor who I've worked with for a number of years in my work, like around leadership development, and there's a couple things that I think his presence is really strong. Even he wasn't physically in the room around the design of this Flourishing Lab. Number one is he's like, the goal is to kind of confuse people on day one. Like you leave the container unfinished and you let people go home and digest, and you don't try to so neatly, guide, but instead leave things kind of open. And that really, really allows for people to go wherever they need to go. And when we come back on day two, we're ready to receive that and process it. So I think that's an important piece. Another thing I think he's taught me is, when you're in the corporate space, there's often a tension around like, what's the ROI on this program, right? Like trying to get the outcomes. And yet true transformative work can take a long time to process. And in fact, if you ask somebody at the end of a program, like literally right at the very end, when you're walking out, they might feel in that moment exhausted or frustrated even, or tired or confused. But that actually, in the work of transformation, is it means we've really done something. So I think, right, because it can take, sometimes I hear from folks, I've really learned that throughout my whole career. It's like, maybe it takes a bit more time to process, right? And maybe it's like a year later, they're like, oh, now I understand like what actually happened there. And there's just like so many layers of learning. So I think the Flourishing Lab is like, that second day that we had together was much more about sensing. And that just emerged from the group. It was much less about more simulations, more games. It was much more about like, okay, here's how I lead. Let me take responsibility for my purposes. Okay, here's what the situation's asking. Who are we? Like, how am I so open in this moment that I'm sensing what's needed in real time? This like real emergent element that comes, if you think of the work of Otto Scharmer at MIT, the presencing, that the deepest layer where we're actually like sensing what is emerging here. And we just practiced that. There's so many different little exercises that emerged, and it was so fun. And again, I'm not, pinned to those short-term ROIs, but actually giving space to just like bring whatever was emerging there and give the space for it. And actually, Mateusz and I spent a day, I guess, talking to folks who participated in this very first one, even just a couple days after. And it was super interesting to hear the wildly different experiences in the same room, right? And I already see, after almost a month, how different folks are growing in very different ways. And but that's how leadership is. True leadership and transformative leadership, it's meeting people where they are and creating that space to really level up. Beautiful work.
Oh, Em, I'm so delighted for you and everyone who experienced that, and for Mateusz as well. This moment is about your natural genius. If there's a spark within you that wants to develop a lighter way, a clearer signal to achieve more, I'd like to work with you one-on-one. If you're after inspired direction in what you have to give, get in touch with me via our website, naturalgenius.com.au. Now back to the natural genius. It's so topical right now. Part of the reason for starting this podcast was to talk about that sensing and that intuitive layer as well. That day 2 that you just described, it's so exciting for people to be starting to get into that sensing layer. And I really do think in this moment in time with business, the more we can get into that, the faster we can get into shorter to-do lists and working smarter than harder. I use the example of putting a prompt into an agent and you don't always know what you're going to get as a response. And a friend and I've said this a few times, we coined the term micro agility. It's like we don't quite know what's going to come out from that prompt. And so we've got to get ready to be agile quickly to then change directions because there's something better that's come up that I may not have thought of. It also brings up, I love that you said Otto Scharmer. I was having a chat with Pete Spence, who I did an episode on this podcast with a while back today, and we were talking about Otto Scharmer's work, so that's fun that it's come up into the conversation with you as well. And that deeper sensing state of being able to really get into what is in this moment, what is there to do as a founder, as a leader. That's so exciting to hear, because all the self-organizing stuff and all the individual being in their alignment in that moment is where the deeper sensing comes out. So yeah, I'm so delighted to hear what you're up to.
Part of it is like the language we were using, which is not Otto Scharmer language necessarily, but it holds the space for it. Is like, hold the inquiry, hold the question. And, I think network school has a reputation of being, historically a bit more like the tech bro startup society. And interesting to hear the perspective of some of the participants who might come from that background, right? Say, Em, you walked the line. This was somebody else's words, not mine. Like, you walked the line of woo woo, but you never crossed it, but you were right on the edge.
I think that's you, Em.
I was like, what an interesting way to think about it, right? I think for me, I often think about that line more like, what's the edge of growth without getting hurt? I think I often think about like trying to push people and find their edge, but without crossing it, so that it bleeds to the dancing with that line. So it was interesting to hear that sort of space of like, well, what's the value of holding the inquiry instead of trying to solve it right away, and actually dancing with some of the assumptions behind what we're doing, and the power in noticing that in real time, and then what that can open up. So I think that's what we were actually practicing. But let's just say we had to get there. That was a journey. We couldn't just start, right? We built around these co-creating a safe place to play there and dance there. And I didn't use the word dance. I used the word play and practice, which is probably better terminology in many ways. I met Otto Scharmer. I participated in a workshop in New York last year that was part of the Club of Rome. It's a different conversation I've been part of, sort of separate from, let's say, that this bucket that we know each other through, which is the network school, and which to me is a community of builders who are, designing for ways to level up personally, ecosystemically, in their work and everything. And so that's why I keep playing over there. And that's how we know each other, right? But this one in New York was much more about transforming business education for flourishing. And that's been another really interesting channel of my energy over the last year. And it was really fun to just participate in that. So there was about 100 universities, scholars from different universities that are all invested in different ways in how do we fix not dying, but universities, business schools that are not preparing students to lead in the future in a way that's actually going to support flourishing. And
so important.
Yeah, right. So that's been another really interesting and important piece. So I've also been looking at, how can we take some of the work of thriving, this idea that how do we get, I don't want to call them shortcuts, but what are things we can do as professors to get ourselves into that state of thriving where we're learning and feeling vital. And if those are conditions, right, and they can be generated at a much quicker, more individualistic scale than, say, societal flourishing for planetary flourishing, right? So if we focus on getting the conditions and put professors into a state where they're feeling more vital in their learning, then from that place, how can we help them switch up their curriculums, engage differently with their students, sort of shift some of these pieces. So that's been a really interesting project that's also close to my heart. I'm going to launch another, we call it Level 1, which is part of the Humanistic Leadership Academy. So there's kind of 4 levels. It's designed for business school professors and faculty, administrators. So I'm sort of trying to grow out the Asia Pacific piece of that. So that's going to be launching in March, and it's been interesting to see the seeds of where that's growing. But it feels like just a lot of the way I make decisions around where do I spend my energy in 2026, it's like I think about where my energy is the amount of effort I put in has a real ripple effect. I don't know if it's always been like that at other parts. Like there's been other stages of my life, stages of my career where I feel like so effortful, right? Like I've put in a lot of effort and I don't get a lot of return. But at this stage, I just notice like network school is such a good example where people are so ready to grow. And so there's the output, the energy I put in, and then what comes out the other side is so beautiful that it's like it's just worth.
So pleased to hear that. And if I can just interject, I really still often say that one of the character traits of the friends I quickly made and a lot of the people that I met at network school was big-heartedness, which is not what I expected. And people talk sometimes quite disparagingly around tech bros. And I was just and around AI builders, especially with so much conversation about doomsday AI these days. And I try to describe the people at network school that I met that were building these purposeful businesses and were really big-hearted. I think that would lead your work there to be extra enjoyable, because not only are people are open and ready to grow, it's also that they're perhaps appreciative, which always goes a long way, and encouraging, curious. Em, I want to make sure that in this conversation we bring in Dawn. Before we hit record, we were talking about this great post that one of the network school ladies has posted recently on X. And do you want to lead out? Because I just thought that the way that you read part of the post to me and your delight in it, and that it's stayed with you since you read it yesterday, I'd love to share that with others.
Absolutely, because I think it speaks to our interconnection, right? Like our connection, and and also Dawn and others like her too, right? So Dawn calls them in this X post cultural unicorns. This idea of you have to we can link the I hope we can link the post, but just this idea of how important it's this what we were just talking about energy, right? That the unicorn has an outsized impact in a community. And who is the unicorn? It's the person who's community oriented, who sees and hears people, not just in that moment, but props them up so that they feel empowered to go and be their best bold self. So there's something about the unicorn contributing to the conditions, right? To building the conditions. And I know from what I saw you doing at network school, like you really modeled that. So in such a big hearted way, and that's what connected us, right? And that I guess the one of the sort of slogans at the core values of NS is win and help win. I don't know if competition is necessarily like my go-to motivator, but I get that it in a startup ecosystem, it's certainly a great frame. But yeah, to my unexpected surprise, the so many beautiful people like you, like Dawn, contributing to win and help win in such a big-hearted way by seeing and hearing and supporting people in like really big and really small ways as the currency of what's going to build that successful community, right? And you being such a key part of that. You were so key there, Sam. And Dawn is really key, and it's like I feel part of. I feel like I play a role there. It's a beautiful thing to be part of.
And especially for you, Em, being able to come in each month and see the progress and to see the different players come through, that is a real gift. And I love that you get a lot back from that as well. In your conversation just then, it just reminded me of that saying, if your next door neighbour has a fancy new car, don't feel disappointed that you don't have it. Go next door and say, congratulations. So I feel like network school people, there was that feeling of camaraderie and real wanting to lift each other up rather than, as you say, the competitive win at all costs version of win and help win.
Yeah, I mean, you're describing the neighbor. That's it. Like that feels like envy, right? I remember reading Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart book, where she described different emotions in more detail. And I remember explicitly the conversation around the difference between envy and jealousy, and some of those pieces, and envy being like when you wish you had something that somebody else has, right? And noticing, yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know, I don't even know exactly where I'm going with this, but noticing how those are real feelings that emerge, and yet they're, when you think about when you can really buy into like flourishing ecosystemically, there are also ways to just zoom out enough where you turn that envy into joy and celebration and actually like somehow like a reaffirmation that maybe you're on a different path, right? That we're all on our own path. And anyway, I'm going on
I love it, Em. I love that we've given you in this conversation something more to ponder, which I think that is your work.
Like at the beginning of this session, I've been practicing deep work a lot, and the good news is it's working, and the bad news is it's working.
Love that for you, Em. I just think it's just wonderful how much you contribute and how curious you are, and that you've found this work that has kept sustaining you for so many years that you still delight in and that you can play with and create great ripple effects and be curious about and research and find different communities to come into. Because even when you were describing New York earlier, I was thinking, oh, you get to tell them about Network School and then any other communities that you're part of, Bali, living there. And I also, really appreciate in this conversation that you were talking about the individual flourishing, that it is what has Em flourish, what has Sam flourish, what has others flourish. I really do think that that's an exciting thing for people to create for themselves and also explore.
Absolutely, like always, and especially now. I think there's relevance to this exercise at any time, but like right now, people are feeling overwhelmed and unsure, and we're entering more chaos and more complexity. It's like, start to craft what flourishing looks like. Start to build. Take a step towards away from. It literally starts by like, taking a step in a direction that's closer to that line of like, what's the edge of my growth? For many folks, that's like choosing to go participate in a place like in a startup society or like just a different kind of community, or going back and finding ways to just plug into learning in ways that you're interested, right? Whether it's conventional or unconventional. These are things we can do at any time that put us back closer to the conditions of thriving. My theory is really, when we're in a state of thriving, we're so much more generative. We're able to do that work, the sensing work that we're talking about. And that allows us to co-create a future right now. And that's beautiful. So perfect. I see it's gotten dark while we're talking. Look at that.
Yeah, it has gotten dark. I was just mindful that I probably should have organised a light, but I'm on the move right now. Em, tell me, is there any final things that you wanted to say before we close out?
I just can't wait to continue to follow the beautiful work that you're doing.
Here's to us, Em. Win and help win. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for listening to the Natural Genius podcast. Please share this with anyone who came to mind and visit us at naturalgenius.com.au. Thanks so much.